Hello everyone and welcome to Handmade Hero. This is the show where we code a complete game live on stream. I don't really remember what I said I was going to do on Monday. Again, yesterday was off. But I believe what we were going to do was start to sort of develop a little bit more of the metagame structure of Handmade Hero. Now, Handmade Hero is designed, and this is just, again, my own personal preference. I am not a game designer. So Handmade Hero is mostly designed by just putting in the things that I prefer when I play a game and trying to figure out things that can go in the design that will force us to tackle interesting programming problems and show you how to do professional quality programming. So I'm not trying to say that this is the correct way to design a game or anything like that, but the way that I prefer games is to have very, very little metagame. I tend to like a game to get right into it, and I like as much of the experience as possible to take place in the game, not in a series of menus. And so the more menus and stuff that pop up in a game, or the more front matter there is in a game, the less pleased I typically am with that. So Handmade Hero is not designed to have very much metagame, but it needs at least two pieces of metagame, I think, in order to sort of have the feel that I would like it to have. And that is that when you boot the game, I would like there to be some way of playing an intro sequence. And the reason for that is I would like there to be a sort of just a little bit of context to the experience. And since Handmade Hero is very much a direct action-y kind of game, I don't really feel like that context should come as sort of embedded in the game, because the game should have a very quick flow to it. It shouldn't have a lot of interstitial elements to the game. And so I would just like to take a more traditional, old-school approach to it, where there's just some kind of like an attract mode, where if you have not indicated to the game that you would like to start playing yet, it will show you a little bit of a story. And so that's why we implemented those cutscenes. Those are kind of what I imagine would be the attract mode. So I'd like to have the metagame consist primarily of just, once you start the game, you are watching the story, and the story will just kind of loop until you decide to begin the game proper. And when you begin the game proper, you will be placed into the game experience and you'll play. And I don't want to have a lot of other stuff. So I don't want to have a lot of things like pick a save slot. I don't want to have a bunch of stuff like tune the options. Do you want music? Like, I don't want any of that. I just want it to be right, and you start and you play, and the absolute minimum amount of stuff should happen otherwise. There shouldn't be anything else in there, right? And so right down to the part where, like, if there were going to be options of some kind in the game, I would want you to basically hop the character around to set them, rather than having something that pops up that's a different experience, like a menu experience. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. And so really there'll only be two primary modes to the game. There's the attract mode, and then there's the game mode. But even just implementing that basic idea still requires you to tackle essentially the entire metagame problem, which is to say that the game has to understand that it can be in more than one mode, right? And creating a more complex metagame is really no different. It just means there are more modes, right? There are more things that can happen, more variety, like a broader variety of interactive sort of vertical slices of your game, where it's going to be like, oh, okay, here's the game one, here's the option menu, here's a save game selection, here's this, that, the other thing, right? And so the programming is basically the same as what we're going to do here. There's just more of it. And since I don't like those things, I'm not going to do them. I'm going to skip those, and we're going to try to put everything that we can into the actual game experience as much as possible. And if we find that we need some kind of options or some kind of other things like that, we'll put them into the game as much as we can. All right, so let's go ahead and see where we left off. This is day 226. So if you pre-ordered the game on handmadehero.org, day 225 is really the one that you want to go with. You want to unpack that source code, and that way you'll be in the same state that I am today. And, oops, Enax. I wonder if that's a good editor. I don't know what Enax is. That sounds wonderful. So if I compile here and just get myself set up, let's go ahead and start this guy. the last thing that we sort of did, the last feature we did was sort of the fade in and out. Oh, and that reminds me, looking at this, another thing that we never really knew was why our fade appears to be highly nonlinear, right? That was another thing that was kind of a little bit confusing when we tackled it, right? It didn't quite seem right, and it made me wonder, do we have some kind of a weird bug in the system where we're not treating our colors as gamma corrected properly, you know, or something like this? I don't really know. But the point is simply that there does seem to be something that's not happening correctly, right? So that fade was also a thing. I don't know that we want to look at that now. It's kind of off topic, but it's definitely something that we should look into eventually. So yeah. So where we left things was this will play, and then if I actually start the game, you know, it does exactly what you would think. So I hit the spacebar, and you can kind of see that, you know, I end up with my hero again, and we're in there. And I can also hit, if I want to, I can hit escape and come out, and we're back to the cutscene again. And if I hit space, I go back in, right? But you can see that, and of course, it creates a new player and all that stuff. So we don't even have that part of stuff working either, right? We didn't do any of the stuff. But primarily, the first thing that I want to tackle is just that notion that when I return back here, and now I'm in this mode where I'm watching the cutscene, what I want to do is when I return to attract mode, it should kind of be aware of the fact that I've returned to attract mode. It shouldn't just go back to where we left off in the cutscene. That's not what I wanted to have happen. I would want it to go back to like the main attract screen and then do some kind of thing where it started the cutscene all over again, regardless of where you exited. And so in order to do that, I need to have some way of understanding when a mode transition has occurred. And so that's what we're going to have to deal with now. I'm just going to wait till Krampus comes in because I like it when Krampus comes in. There he is. Hello, Krampus. All right. So, let's go ahead. I'm a little bit dry. I forgot my drink. It's never a good thing when I forget my drink. All right, so let's take a look at where we are. If you remember, we sort of had the notion of the cutscene here. We're inside this state right here, the game state. We created a playing cutscene, and the playing cutscene controls this code that we did that plays cutscenes, so that if you initialize one and you tell it what you want to do, you can then update it as frequently as you want, and it'll continue playing cutscene. So we did that. That all works fine. But all we did for switching between the cutscene and the game is we literally just checked to see whether any heroes existed in the game. That's it. Like, there's nothing else that we've done. And so what that means is, again, when a hero gets created or when a hero gets destroyed, if the number of heroes goes down to 0, then suddenly you'll be back in the cutscene. If the number of heroes goes above 0 to 1, then suddenly you'll be in the game. But the game itself is never explicitly aware of that transition, right? We have no idea when we transition from being in the state of having heroes and playing the game and back, or in the state of not having any heroes and watching the cutscene. And we need to know what that actually, we have to have a way of detecting that transition, because if we don't detect and respond to that transition, we will never know when we need to reset our cutscene. Yes? And so that's the part that we need to make a little more formal here. And so that's the part that I'm going to try to start formalizing as we move forward. Okay. So what I'd like to do is say, well, maybe we've got that handmade cutscene thing. So maybe what I really need to say is, well, we've got handmade attract mode. So I'm just going to consider there to be a handmade attract mode, right? And we kind of know what handmade attract mode is. It's this, right? It's this right here. And I could, I suppose, if I wanted to, I guess now that I think about it, there might not be very much in that file. I don't really know. So maybe we could sort of keep it simpler and say that, maybe that just goes here in handmade cutscene.h. I'm not sure, right? So we could say, like, okay, maybe there's just a thing that's like, it's attract mode or whatever. And in attract mode or attract mode state might be the best way to say it. In attract mode state, we bundle up the sorts of things that actually that we need in order to play the attract mode. So there's one, right? We've got the cutscene that might be there. And we also probably have something like, if we wanted a main menu, not a main menu, but what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever you want, a title screen, let's say. So if we, we've got the cutscene that plays. If we just want a thing that's like, Handmade Hero, press start to begin, or press keyboard, or whatever, if we want just that screen that just sits there for about, 10 seconds or something, and then the cutscene starts playing. If we want something like that to happen, so it's a little bit more like an arcade game, or if we'd rather have it just start the cutscene right away, play the whole cutscene, then go to that title screen, then start the cutscene again. Any sort of setup like that. Then what we need is some notion of which of those we were in, right? We would need sort of like a sort of states there, right? Okay, so you could imagine doing that one of two ways. One, I could have like something here that's like, a title screen, like a Boolean, and I set it, and that's whether I'm playing the cutscene or not, or whatever. But my assumption is that whatever mode handling we do for handling the fact that we're either in the attract mode or in the game mode, we could presumably just use that same mode handling to handle the difference between the title screen, the cutscene, and the game. All three of them, right? So what I'm assuming we would do is we'd say something like this, which is like game mode, and we just say, okay, there's game mode, title screen, there's game mode, cutscene, and there's game mode playing or something, right? Or world, right? Where I'm off in the world. Something like this. And there might even be yet another one, I'm not sure, depending on how we want to do that, which is that there might be like a world game mode and a sort of like options game mode where like, let's say, for example, we want to support multiple save slots. You could imagine like when you start the game, you actually start off like in the orphanage, and there's different like rooms, and each room is a different save game, so you hop into the room that you want to play at that time. That's again sort of it's like a menu, right? It's just a menu created in the game. And so that, depending on how we might want to do it, that could also be a different game mode. I don't know. It might still be the world game mode, but I'm not sure. So that's just something to think about, just something to keep in mind. But let's say for now that we only have the three that I already know that we want, so that we can work with those instead. So if I wanted to do that, then what I'd say is, all right, we've got our game mode, and this is, whatever it is. This is the mode right here. And then what I would have to do is I'd have to have some way of having, different storage for different game modes or different stuff like this, right? So I'd have to have some way of creating basically like a holding place for these things. And so what I'd like to point out here is that each of these things that we're talking about, each of them kind of wants to have its own storage, and most of them, or perhaps even all of them, but regardless, will get like shut down sort of altogether. So in other words, when I'm playing in a particular game world, it's going to do whatever it's going to do, and it's going to have all its storage. When I'm done with that, all of that storage is just going to go away, right? And the same is true of like the title scene or the cutscene or whatever. When I start it up, it's going to do some stuff to like make that happen, but then when I shut it back down again, it's not it's not going to need to retain anything, right? And so that to me also suggests that I'm going to have some kind of a sort of like I'm going to have some kind of a blind pointery kind of thing here, right? So I'm going to do something where I say like, all right, I've got a game mode, and whatever the game mode is going to kind of determine what I'm doing. And then inside, in addition to that, I need to store something that tells me what's going on. So maybe I have something like, okay, I've got the attract mode state, and this is the attract mode or whatever. And then I'd have the world state, and that would be here. And we have stuff like that already. Like we have like world star world here, right? And that would be something, for example, that would, might become sort of the state of the world. Now, I'm not going to try and pre-guess that. I'm just going to continue from this basic premise. I'm going to start pulling things out and just see where it leads. but you can kind of get the idea, right? You kind of can start to see where I'm going with that. All right. Now, I don't really care too much about this being an allocation style thing. So what I really could do too is just say that we always actually have the track member, but I'm going to do it as an allocation style just in case it's a large thing. It can get flushed completely, and so we can kind of see how that goes, what we want to do with that, right? All right, so let's slowly start to tease this apart. Let's slowly start to see what we can do with that. So I'm going to say that inside this, I'm going to have two different kinds of things. I'm going to have something that looks like this, right? I'm going to have internal. Ooh, I don't know why is that? Do we know why that was? Oh, right. It's Handmade Hero. The active line shows blue. For some reason, I forgot that. But that's, I think, how it's supposed to work. Yeah. It's weird that I didn't think that was supposed to happen. It's been happening on stream. It never struck me as odd on 11 million previous streams. For some reason, just then it did. Don't ask me. Don't know why. All right, but yeah, that's supposed to happen, right? That's how we do it on Handmade Hero. We've been doing it that way for a year. Brain's getting old. Anyway, so I'm going to do an update and render title screen, you know, and I'm going to do an update and render cutscene. And so then I can just kind of put this in here, so it's like, okay, that's what that is, right? Yeah. I'm going to replace this guy with a switch on that game mode. So instead of just looking at this exactly, well, we'll see. We're going to leave this here for a minute. Right. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to switch on whatever our game state says the game mode is, right? So we've got this guy here, this game mode, and then we know that it can be these things. And so I'm going to say, okay, here's the title screen. Here's the cutscene. Here's the world. So there's three different modes we could be in. And then, of course, we also have, I don't know if we ever did an invalid default case. Did we ever do that one? I kind of like this one. I never remember whether we did it on Handmade Hero or not. Let's see, invalid code path. Yeah, we did. I like invalid default case. Because that game mode should always be set to something valid, hopefully. And the other thing we can do here is also, if we want, we can set it to something like game mode, uninitialized or none, which is like by default when we start up, we've got no game mode. We could also do something like that. I don't know that we really need to do that at the moment, so I'm going to leave that out. But sometimes it's good to have a zero value that's like kind of the invalid set. All right. So in here, we kind of already know what this is going to be. We're going to call, whenever we're in the cutscene mode, we're going to call, update and render cutscene. We know in worlds, we're going to do update and render game. And I suppose this could maybe more appropriately be called update and render world. And finally, in the title screen, we've got update and render title screen, which is just something that we'll create at some point. I know that I want a little title screen there, so I know we're going to have one. But at the moment, it's not really actually going to do anything. It'll just probably be a blank screen, or who knows what it'll be. We'll figure out something. Something. Okay. So there, oops. Tried to cut and paste. I failed. Okay, so let's try this. Here we go. And so when I call update and render title screen, I'm going to get these sort of things here. Now, the problem with this is I probably want to have a way of passing these guys just about everything that there is to have. Well, I don't really have to, I guess, because since I'm using a switch statement. Never mind. Doesn't really matter. So this will be fine. So, yeah. If I want to have this, all I really need to do is make sure that I pass it all the things that I know that I need, which is really just these things, right? These things. And I need to know a couple different things that we didn't actually have, like I need to know the DT. And probably, honestly, I'm going to need more than just the DT. I'm probably actually also going to need the whole input. I feel like it's going to have to respond to input. So it's probably going to be something that takes that directly. And then for advanced cutscene, this thing, where and also for here, where we get that current cutscene, I think, again, I want that to refer to this attract mode state, right? Or something like that. Probably, I don't really know. Maybe I don't even need that. I don't know, we'll see. But point being, yeah, in here, I think what we would do is expect there to be some kind of a wrapped up storage that would be used for these guys. I'm not sure exactly what it would be, but it looks to me like we've already kind of done it right here. Where, so, you know, this might be like something like game mode cutscene, right? And it sort of has this information in it. I think that might be a little bit more logical with the way that I would want this to work, right? Okay. So let's see. So we've got game mode attract, maybe something like that. Game mode cutscene and game mode world. Something like this. Those are the three things that I've got right now. And so, yeah, once I call into one of those guys, look, I do update and render world, right? It only makes sense that it's going to get a pointer to one of those. Now, this doesn't actually exist yet, but these two should. So I've got game mode cutscene and I've got game mode attract. We don't really know what the attract mode has in it at the moment, so I'll just stick a T in there or something so that it's got something, but we'll play with that a little bit more later. And then we've got the cutscene, which of course is this guy, and that one already does kind of exist as well. All right. So if I want to do this, where we're going to do make intro cutscene, I'm going to do this a little bit differently now. I'm gonna change a little bit how I would do this, right? And I'm going to say that maybe the outside, the code outside is going to sort of give me an arena or something to work with, something like that, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this arena, whatever the arena is going to get passed in here. So it's basically going to say, hey, I need you to like make the intro cutscene or whatever. I want you to store your state in this particular arena. And so off it goes, right? It's going to do whatever it needs to do for that. So this would just be like, okay, I'm going to do a push struct on this arena for a playing cutscene. I'll get one back, I set it up, and then I return it. And that's how I initialize the cutscene, right? So if I did something like that, then I would also have something that like shuts down the cutscene, but I don't really need to shut anything down because I know that the person outside can just jettison the arena and everything's fine. So for now, I'm just going to assume that modes don't need to be shut down. They can just be jettisoned because that's generally probably what I will end up doing most of the time. All right, so if I make an intro cutscene like that, that sort of allows me to store the cutscene information, and then updating it is a simple matter of passing that back, right? So something that looks like this. That's the entirety of what we currently need to do, but we're going to probably move a little bit more code in there in the future. We'll find out. But that's basically what's going to happen. We're going to be doing the playing cutscene there. And update and render title screen would be, you know, something similar. I'm not sure, but that's going to have in it, and it's not a playing cutscene anymore. It's a game mode cutscene. Game mode cutscene. And when we do render cutscene at time, this is going to take a game mode cutscene as well, I believe, right? Yeah. And so we'll see. That might be a little too tight, but we'll see. Now, we probably could say, you know, this advance is not particularly interesting, so we probably could just do something where we just do that, right? And the render is not very interesting either, so we probably could just do this. These are probably things that can just be handled like that without overcomplicating things. So I might just do it like that. There's not going to be more than one cutscene playing at once, presumably. So we don't really need to overcomplicate it. But if there was going to be, then you could imagine, right? That sort of thing happening. Okay, so let's see here where we're at. We've got our game mode cutscene. Arena is supposed to be a pointer, and it isn't, which is bad. And that seems like that's fine. Spelling-wise is challenging, but other than that, seems fine. There we go. All right, and so that's all pretty good. So once we've got that, then we just have this title screen guy to work with, and that'd be game mode title screen, which we don't have anyway. So let's use title screen, where the cursor just went. So game mode title screen. And that seems reasonable to me. Okay. So that's all good. Now we just need to get those guys into somewhere where they can be seen. Game mode attract and game mode cutscene. Now, the problem with that is they should be in here already, so I'm wondering why they weren't. I'm not 100% sure. Game mode cutscene. Those should be in there, right? Game mode, because it's attract. There we go. There we go. Current cutscenes, make intro cutscene. So now, all we have to do is actually sort of formalize the notion of switching into game modes, right? Okay. So how am I going to do that? Well, first what I have to do is start to pull out all of the initialization code into something that will allow me to like understand what mode I'm going into and actually do something about it, right? And so if you think about it, like all this code right here is like for simulating the game and doing all that sort of stuff. And then we have all this startup code that's in there that just initializes the world and all that stuff. We don't actually want that all to happen when we start up the game. We don't want to create a game world when we start up the game because no one's playing the game yet. And furthermore, we might have to do that again sometime if the person like exits that game and restarts a new one, right? Like maybe they exit that world, they didn't want to do that world, so they exit and come back in, or who knows what happens, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce another function that just allows me to change what game mode I'm in, and that function will be responsible for initializing whatever the game mode is. So I'm going to do something like set game mode. And set game mode will be something which just kind of, allows me to say I'm going to do this other thing. Whatever the mode I pass is what I want it to be, right? So I'll pass like game state, and I'll pass game mode, and it will set those, right? So basically do like game state, game mode equals game mode. That's what it's going to do. Something like that. So how's that going to work? Well, first it has to clear out whatever the previous mode was, right? So if I have whatever the arena is, I'm going to just reuse the same arena, although in the future I may actually ping pong them for reasons we'll see a little bit further down the line. But for now, let's just start with the simpler approach so you can see it. What I'd like to do first is say, all right, so there's going to be like an arena, and instead of a world arena, I'm actually going to call that something else. I'm going to say that that's basically the mode arena, right? I'm going to say the arena that's being used for allocation here is actually the mode arena. That's where everything is going to come from, right? And so what I want to do is say, well, the game state mode arena is going to get cleared. And I don't know if we have a clear for our arenas. Do we? We don't. Not that I see anyway. Yeah, I don't see it. So I'm going to introduce one here, which is just clear. And this is no different than if we just did a begin temporary memory and then end temporary memory, but I don't want to call it temporary memory because it's not really that temporary. It's pretty much permanent up until the point where we decide to clear it, right? So it's semantically a little bit differently, and I'd rather not mix those two. So I want to have a way of clearing it, and clearing it's pretty straightforward. If you look at what constitutes an arena for our purposes here, there's really not much in it, right? And so if we initialize an arena, for example, you can see what actually happens here. Clearing an arena, for all intents and purposes, is just going to initialize it. That's all it does. So if I were to say, okay, just reinitialize the arena, but reinitialize it with its own base pointer again, that would just clear it out. It'd be like all of the allocations never happened, right? And we could just allocate again to our heart's content. So what I'm going to say is, all right, clear the mode arena, that's all gone. Then switch on the game mode that we pick, whatever that is, and based on what it is, construct a new thingy, whatever the thingy is. And so we already know what those three things could be at the time, right? They're the title screen, cutscene, and the world. But as you can sort of see from this, we sort of don't quite know, right? Exactly which of these things. We don't know what we might need to pass, right? Because imagine, for example, let's make this a little more explicit. Imagine in here, right, when we do make intro cutscene or whatever, let's suppose there was more than one cutscene we might want to play. Well, this set game mode, if you were happening to pass cutscene to it, you would have to actually pass which cutscene you wanted. But that would be a parameter that wouldn't get used if you were doing, say, the title screen. And so you'd end up with set game mode would be taking like all these parameters, is basically the union of all the parameters for all the different game modes, and that's not particularly good, right? That gets unwieldy pretty quickly and not really something we want to have to deal with. So what we would rather do is something like begin game mode or something like this, where we're just going to say, and I guess, you know, we could even still call it set game mode, but instead of doing a switch right here, instead what we'll do is we'll let the person who is actually trying to do it, whatever they were going to do, set up whatever that dependent state actually is. So we won't bother doing anything other than just saying we'll clear out the old mode and off we go. That seems a little more sane to me. Okay, so if we wanted to do that, then all we have to do is make it so that when you try to do something, like one of these things where you play something. So for example, play intro cutscene might be the more sensible thing to do here. What we'd say is, okay, that's going to be like a set game mode call. The set game mode call is going to, why is that? Yeah. That set game mode call is going to take the game state and, sorry, the play intro cutscene is going to take the game state. We're going to call set game mode on the game state with the state of playing cutscene, right? Whatever that is. And I know it's here somewhere. There it is. Right? So that's going to clear anything that was happening before, change us to this mode, which is the cutscene mode. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually create that game mode cutscene ourselves. And so then we would just say, oh, the game state, cutscene, right, this guy, equals whatever we just made. You don't have to return anything because that's just going to do it. And so that would constitute changing a mode. Similarly, in here, if we were to say, okay, play title screen, we'd say, oh, okay, game state, same thing. Literally. We just do, okay, set title screen. Game mode cutscene is actually now going to be game mode title screen. And then we would set something in here, but we don't have anything to set really at all. But, you know, I don't know, we have t, right? Result t equals 0. This one, why is there no result t equals 0 here? I don't know. That seems like a bug to me. But anyway, so then we have a result t equals 0. Then we have game state title screen equals result. And now we can play the intro cutscene or the title screen, and both will work, right? Okay, so let's step through now and fix, we changed that arena situation. Let's step through and fix that. Our initialize arena needs to be fixed. So that's just, we got to pass the size as well. There we go. So now in here, like doing the world arena, what we actually want to do there for things like NSIM, probably what we would really want is for this to no longer be actually looking at the game state much. That's just kind of what we would rather it do. We kind of don't want game state to really be there. That's really, we would just want it to be world, right? And if we look at what's in Handmade world.h, you know, this thing right here, this world is probably actually the thing that should be holding most of those other things that we've got currently sitting in the game state. Now, I don't know that we actually want to do too much of that yet, but you can kind of see where that's going. Like, that's what we would prefer to have happen, I think, because the game state should be sort of like the overall structure that can hold multiple different game modes that are happening in it. And so, again, I'm not really sure what we want to do there, but that's a mutation we probably want to make. So we'll look at that, but I don't want to do that quite yet. I'm going to leave that a little bit more outside of what's going on here. And so for the moment, what I might do is say anywhere that we were using World Arena, because let's take a look. I don't think we're using it that often. I mean, it's used often, but not that often. You know, you can see there's just a few. What I might do is try to push that over so that the world arena actually is in here, right? So there really is a thing that's like world arena. And so instead, it's going to be something like, well, all right, we've got the world, right? So the world comes from game state world. We've got the world, and I want you to always use this world arena instead, right? Something a little bit more like that. I think that's going to be saner. We'll see how it goes as we go forwards. Oops. Let's go ahead and replace game state world with world. There we go. So that should be fine. Okay, so set game mode is something that we would like to have exposed a little more broadly. Right now that's sort of buried in here, but what I'd like to do is say, hey, anyone can call that if you would like. So let's put that up there. All right, and so here when we've got arena, this is going to be the game state mode arena. So those things are all going to come out, like all the modes and all that stuff is just going to come out of there. So then in here with the world arena stuff, again, this is just like add low entity, that sort of stuff. I would like to see that come out of a specific sort of arena that's in the world, just again as preparation of kind of moving these things into groups where we sort of have a concrete notion of what part of it is like world-based stuff and what part of it is not. You know, what part of it is other things like the title screen. And again, this may seem like overkill, and for our game, it may honestly be. But again, I kind of want to show how to do this because a lot of games have a lot more meta state than Handmade Hero does. And so I just want to show how to piece it out into something relatively clean, because whatever game you might want to make may have a lot more option menus, a lot more whatever. I don't know what, but it might have a lot more, whatever that is. So let's do play intro cutscene. Get that going there. All right, so update and render title screen. This is going to take all this stuff, presumably. And I would assume, well, I don't really know what it takes. Let's find out. So update and render title screen is going to take the assets, the render group, the draw buffer, and the title screen. Update and render cutscene, I think takes substantially the same stuff, although I think it also takes the input group, and it probably isn't going to take a title screen, it's going to take the cutscene. And let's go ahead and, I don't know why I can never capitalize cutscene properly. I seem to be really bad at it. Yeah, update and render cutscene. And there we go. Check arena, mode arena. And then we're good to go. All right, so now there's a couple things that we haven't done yet, obviously. One of which is when we create that world in here. We now, whenever we initialize the worlds, we need some way of putting that arena in there. So now when you do this and you do initialize world, you're going to have to pass a memory arena. That's the arena that you want it to actually use for its allocations, right? And so in here where we do world arena, like we were doing it before, and we do this sort of thing, right? We actually need that to sort of happen. We need that to happen in here, you know. So in order to do this, what I'd like to do is kind of move that in here, and say okay. And you know what, I could, when we do this, I could make it so that I just look in GameState directly, but I'm not, again, not really concentrating on this code right now. I'm gonna do it a little bit differently. So anyway, when I do initialize arena to initialize this arena, what I want to do is just use, I think, all the rest of the memory after you when you go to initialize the world. It's supposed to use all the rest of the memory or something like that. I don't really know, right? But something like that. And so if I want to do that, what I want to do is I'm going to get sort of a parent arena. I'm going to get a thing that's like, I'm going to go in here, whatever the here is. And what I want to do is I want to say, hey, however much there is left, which I think we have, right? Do we have that? Get arena size remaining, right? What I want to do is say when we initialize the world, I want to just get whatever there is. So I'm going to get the arena size remaining of the parent arena. And that's actually what I want. And isn't that sub-arena? We already have that. Yeah, we have that. So it's like sub-arena. This is the arena I want to initialize. This is the arena that I'm coming from. I want to use however much there is, and that's all. Something like that. So that's what I want to do. And so then what I would do in here inside handmade, handmade.cpp, what I would do in here is when we actually do initialize arena, this guy can now initialize the mode arena, and we can move forward with it. So then when we look at all this stuff, we can see like world chunk and meters and all that sort of stuff. That is really just this is all part of the world thing, right? This looks like this, right? So we've got all this sort of stuff happening here. Yeah, we'd want to take this world stuff we want to initialize, and here we want to pass it that mode arena. So if you look at what all of this stuff does, all of this stuff is just for initializing the world, right? Every last thing in here has nothing to do with playing a cutscene at all. It's all just initializing the world. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, just like we did update and render world, I'm going to do a thing here where we do like initialize world or something, right? Something like that. Or play world. I don't know what we'll call these things. But what I want to do is have it so that all that stuff actually happens in one of these as well, just like exactly analogous to what I did in the cutscene thing. So right here where I pulled those things apart, I'm going to pull them apart again, just exactly the way I did before, and play world will do exactly what play intro cutscene does, create a world that you can play and set the mode to be playing that world. Okay? So initialize arena, initialize audio state, these are all, in fact, I guess even this stuff here, all this stuff is really just, all of this stuff is really just part of that world creation, right? Every last little thing in here, right? All of this, all of it, everything, all the way down to play cutscene, right? So I'm going to pull that out, and I'm going to put that up sort of isolated into a thing where it's going to be like, okay, this is how we play a world. There you go. And then we're going to deal with it separately. That's going to be a separate thing. Okay, so I'm not going to deal with that quite yet. What is this? Ground buffer. What is ground buffer width? Okay, these guys. Know what those are doing there exactly. They're probably for allocation purposes. I guess ground buffer, I don't even know. I don't know what I want to do with that. I suppose they were used in both places. I'm going to do a little to-do here. Get these into a more reasonable location. But I'm just going to go ahead and pound find that for now. So I don't care about that at all at the moment. Okay. So when we do initialize world, I think this is all good. There we go. So now I think we're totally good, and we've got that sort of play world thing happening. So let's just start by seeing where we're at. Here's running the game. We fade out. We fade into the cutscene. Obviously, that's what we expect because we called play cutscene in our initialization, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Pressing the, oops. I do not know what just happened. I literally have no idea. So I was going to say, pressing the button is going to run code for the world stuff. It's not quite going to do that. It's going to look in through here, and it's going to start trying to do stuff that it can't really do, right? Because the world has not been initialized or anything like that. So all of this stuff here, like that tries to create a new hero and stuff, that is not actually what we would want, right? That's not, none of that stuff is actually able to sort of occur because we haven't actually created a world, right? But the cutscene part is working fine, and that's what we would expect. So now what we need to do is kind of make that world stuff happen a little bit better, a little bit more straightforwardly. And so what I want to do there is I want to kind of figure out how there's some things that will probably be persistent in the game state. For example, we probably want something like our who is joined in the actual game, like what heroes are actually who's signed in, basically, like who's involved in the game. That is probably persistent. So I suspect, that controlled hero, this kind of thing here, I suspect that is actually going to want to be in the actual game state itself. But everything else probably wants to move into the game mode world, basically, whatever you want to call that. And I'm not sure, again, where we want to really put that. It's a little bit confusing because world already sort of meant this sort of storage thing that we had here. But I'm just going to probably start to just dump stuff in there. And if we need to split that file into two later, we can do that later. It's not really my concern at the moment, right? All right. So let's go ahead and see what happens here. If we just have this thing called world, I'm going to see what happens if I just start dumping stuff in there. So let's say I take world here, and I make that show up over here for now. And I don't know that I really need game mode world, but maybe I'll do it that way. So there's game mode world, and so down here there's also, like, game mode world. And then I'm just going to pull out all of this stuff because all of it only really pertains to a particular world, right? So all of this stuff is all that, like it looks like every last bit of this, right? That's all going to come out here, and that's all going to be part of the game mode world. You know what I mean? And so in here we've got all that stuff, and there's obviously an active world that is kind of being played at that time. Maybe there'll be more than one world struct for all we know at certain times. When you're playing, I'm not sure, but point being, that's what that'll look like. And now you can kind of see exactly how this is starting to take shape. Now we've got a meta arena and a mode arena. I don't know what the meta arena is. To be honest, I've completely forgotten. What does that do? I don't know. I'm getting rid of it. Who calls it? I guess this was a bad time to get rid of it. Well, we'll leave it out till someone complains. Anyway, so if we go ahead and start to clean some of this stuff up so that this stuff works, I got to go ahead and figure out how to make sure that everyone is defined properly. I don't remember what happens with low entity. It looks like that's just defined right in here for some reason. And so is like pairwise collision rule. All of these things that are related to that are all in here. And so is like particle cell and particle and all these guys. And so what I'd like to do is I'll go ahead and move those for now into where they now more appropriately belong, which is in here. But probably we'll want to split that up even more in the future. So let's see, in handmade.h, we now have also the problem where like a sim entity, for example, is going to be in handmade sim, right? I assume. That's where we put it. It's been a long time. But I assume so. And here we go. There's sim entity. But I'm assuming that we also probably refer to world things here. Like, for example, we probably refer to world positions, like you can see right there, when we're talking about sim region. So we kind of have a problem where we've just got too many things that depend on each other. And of course, C forces us to deal with this, which is a really annoying aspect of it, because there's absolutely no reason we should have to manage this sort of stuff. But unfortunately, we kind of do. And so we have sort of a declaration conflict there where we have to define sim entity, and I don't really want to move sim, and I don't really want to move sim entity, nor I really don't want to move any of this stuff, so that's kind of annoying. But what I could do is I could put low entity in a slightly different position. Could I do that? Well, you know what I could do? I could just make world position be in here for a minute, which is not where I want it. But you can see this is, again, like I said, it's just really annoying. It's just a really, really annoying aspect of programming in a language that doesn't understand that files should have nothing to do with dependency. It's just stupid. But, you know, that's you go to Handmade Hero with the language you have, not the language you'd like to have. So anyway, if I go ahead and do that, then I just need to switch the order in which these two things happen. We just do it like that, and presumably we'd be fine. Yeah, and so that would be it. World's got to come second, and sim region comes first. Oops, I switched the wrong ones there. I meant to do the H files. Sorry about that. This is what I actually want to do, world.h, simregion.h. I just want to do that. And then we should be, hopefully, a little bit better. World chunks the same way. So you can kind of see like I got to move the things that are primal here, and that's just really annoying. So I don't know, maybe we can do something a little bit more with that. Wait, okay. Here's the compromise. Here's what I'll do. This is less bad. I'm just going to make a handmade, world mode.cpp nh, which I don't love, but that would just allow us to get out of the business of having these in the same file, right? There we go. Problem solved in not a very savory way, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. All right, so then if I go back to handmade.h, then we can just do, okay, world comes first, sim region comes second, and world mode comes last. Same thing with here. World mode. Actually, that probably wants to go way down at the bottom. Probably something like that. Okay. Test diffuse and test normal. Probably those were a little overzealous. Those are just test things, so those can probably stay in here for the time being until they just get removed entirely. And so that'll be fine. Random series definitely should be there, so I don't know where that's not there. Random should probably just be at the top. That's definitely a mathy sort of a thing, so that's fine. Audio state. Again, audio state totally should not have been moved. That was just, again, a little bit overzealous. These two guys should probably be, for the time being, still off in handmade.h, because we really haven't formalized something like what sound is playing or anything like that. So that should be kind of left for later. All right, so now let's see what's going on. We got to port all this code. I probably shouldn't have done this with so little time left in the stream, but you know, you got to do what you got to do. So we'll see what we can do. All right. So get low entity is now going to be something that's called on the world mode, and so all of these things are going to force us to kind of go through a really annoying process of just kind of moving things over. But again, it's not really a big deal. It's just a little bit. It's just a little bit of pain that you got to go through sometimes when you want to make a large change. But it's really just a minor annoyance. It shouldn't be really something to worry about too much, and not really something I worry about very much either. A lot of times people will do coding things to try to prevent themselves from having to do some of these things, and I just don't think that's a very good idea. I prefer to just go through this kind of cleaning up every now and again and partitioning, and you just kind of bite the bullet for that limited amount of time you have to do that. That's usually much better than trying to do extra layers of insulation and stuff that make your code a lot worse and uglier just for the sake of not having to go through an hour of this kind of thing or something like that, right? So anyway, let's go ahead and put this in here. So get low entity state. This is just going to be game mode world. No, call that world mode or something like that. And that's just going to do game state world mode. I'm not sure what else we could call that. I don't really know. They're not great names, I admit that, but what are you going to do? All right, and so then all of these things, presumably, like entity reference, all that sort of stuff, all of these things actually are not really using the game state anymore. They're all going to use actually that game mode world pretty much exclusively, right? There's not going to really be much game state stuff happening anymore. So I think I may be able to just blanket say that game state, that's just going to be game mode world star world mode. I think I can pretty much just say that across the board. And so furthermore, I think I could probably say that like game state is just always world mode. I think. And we'll find out, but that's what I think will be true. And it does look like that's very likely. So add collision rule. Again, so now these guys, we've got to kind of get those pulled out a little bit more. So we've got add collision rule. And actually a lot of these things in game world mode, right? A lot of these things are probably going to go in here. So I'm just going to grab them out. In fact, you can kind of see a lot of them right now. Look at all these guys. These are all really, none of this stuff is actually generic. It's all part of that. So this is all going in there. And then we've got ground chunks. Those are not really related to that, so that's all good. This is all fine. That can stay. Okay, all this stuff. Put that out here. All this stuff is again comes into the new file as well, because this is all stuff that has to do with the game world. Okay, all that goes there, and then that should be just about it. Right. Okay. So let's keep going. We've got add collision rule there. That's going to be on the game on the world mode. So add collision rule, and I guess this is the same thing is going to happen here. Basically, everywhere we would have had game state, it's going to be game mode world mode. And all the rest of these guys, game state, are going to be world mode as well. There's a lot of them, folks. There are a lot of them, it would seem, if you ask me. But that's fine. You know, that's just the way it goes sometimes. Look at all of these. My lord. Okay. So let's see what else we got. Add collision rule. Where is add collision rule? Game mode, world mode. What's the... Oh, it probably was predefined. And it's probably predefined wrong. There we go. Problem solved. Okay. And this will probably need a struct. Pre-declaration. So let's keep going. Okay. So play world. In this case, play world, this one actually does want to remain the same. So there are a couple in here that we want to keep. Probably just that one. Probably not too many more. What is this stuff has to... We don't have a world mode yet. Okay, so that's actually fine too. Really all we want to do there is we want to allocate one of these. So we just need to say that this is going to do exactly analogous to the other thing we were doing here. So when we start out to play a world inside... why could I not get to my handmade cutscene? We want to do the exact same thing we were doing before, right? For play world, we want to do set the game mode to game mode world. That clears us out. Then we want to do a game mode world mode equals game mode world, right? Like that. And then we want to allocate basically all the rest of the stuff that we can get, right? So that's totally fine. All right. So let's see. Ground chunk updating and ground chunk rendering for the world. I'm not sure how exactly we want to handle that stuff. I guess we just pass the trans state in. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we want to do there. I can leave the ground chunk stuff in there because it does seem relevant. So maybe this stuff does want to be there. Yeah, I don't know. Let's try it for now. We'll see. I'm not sure what I think of it, but we'll see. So if I wanted to leave that in here, we'll just drop it in there and see what happens. Probably fine, possibly fine. I don't know. All right. So chunk dim in meters is not a member of game mode world. That's probably true. I agree with that. That is actually, it's a game mode world. That is also wrong. World mode. There we go. Okay. So this should be world mode. World mode. World. Probably should dereference those. Seems like a pretty long pointer chain to crawl for no apparent reason, but doesn't really matter at this point. So let's see. Get random bitmap from identifier not found. So does that mean assets has not been specified quite yet? I guess that's what that means. Let's take a look here. Maybe move that a little bit lower. No, asset has been. Oh no, it hasn't been. Never mind. There we go. In fact, asset should probably be quite a bit further up. Shouldn't asset be like more like there? Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Fill ground chunk. Cannot convert to from game mode world to game state. What does fill ground chunk expect? Expect a game state, but why? Does it need a game state? Do we know? I feel like this could be a game mode world. Right? And I feel like that's probably actually better because that also reduces that like sort of long dependency chain there as well. So then we would just do, okay, world mode plus world mode. And this is game mode world. World mode. And I'm pretty much out of time, but oh well. So this stuff is now what we would have to sort of concentrate on a little bit more. I'm going to go past it just a bit, just to make sure what's going on here. So play sound, I'm going to not worry about the sound stuff for right now. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and comment those out because I don't care about sound at the moment. And let's see. tsyn, output test sine wave, don't care about that at the moment either, but I'm going to leave it in there just in case we want it later. Let's see, controlled heroes, I'm skipping. And let's see. Initialize audio state in game update and render. So when we initialize the audio state, we would want to do that, I guess, before we do the mode arena. So I don't know why we set it up that way. That's kind of a little bit weird. It seems like we would rather do something. In fact, how is that doing what it's doing? I don't really know. I don't really know what that's doing. I feel like that wants to be in its own arena. I feel like this wants, and in fact, to be honest with you, I feel like all this stuff wants to be done in a way that's a little bit more, how should I put it? I feel like all this stuff wants to be done in a way that's a little bit more systemic than what is being done at the moment. I feel like what I would rather do, right, is do something like this. This is the total arena, you know, and it just says like, okay, I'm going to initialize the total arena, and that's going to do this. And that way I can just do like, oh, okay, you know, I might want different arenas for different things. So I do, okay, let's like say there's a sub arena that's going to be for the audio, something like that. And to be honest, I don't really remember how the audio stuff works. I assume it just keeps a pointer to the arena it's using. Yeah, that's what it does. So I'm just going to say, okay, there's a sub arena, you know, and we give that a megabyte to work with or something like that. However much we decide we want audio state space to take. So there's going to be something like this. It would be from the total arena. And then we would do the same thing with our game, the mode arena, right? So the mode arena, which is going to haul the rest of this stuff, that would just take the rest. Something like that. Then when we initialize, we pass the audio arena, like so, and all would be good. Now, the only problem is this guy's got to stay around, so we need this thing to be in here. Although really what we probably again should do is have the audio state itself allocate that. I'm doing too much cleanup at once. Not really amenable to an hour stream, but when I get it in my head that I'm cleaning something up, I like want to clean it all up. That's just the nature of how I tend to code. So it's hard to leave things as messy as I have to leave them on the stream sometimes, a lot of times, most times, you might even say. But that's just the nature of how the show has to go. So anyway, I'm going to do like to do move this into the memory system, the audio system proper. And we'll try to do it some other time. Okay, so let's see. We've got the audio arena, and we made that one. We've got the get remaining arena, size remaining, total arena. There we go. Initialize the audio state, play the intro cutscene. That looks a little bit better to me. It's certainly much cleaner than it was. Skipping control of heroes again, and just finishing up the rest of this. The audio arena is now in the game state. We don't need this pointer at all anymore, do we? Is that even, what is that even doing? Nothing. So that goes away. And then we have, yeah, again, just that control with the delete entities, update and render world, transient state connector everyone from game state to game mode world. So that would just be world mode, like this, I believe. And yeah, so now I think we're pretty much all good. And this is just the only part that we haven't done yet. So that should leave us at a reasonable stopping point, I think. I'm not sure. Am I right about that? I don't know if I actually am. Yeah. Yeah. And then what's this complaining about? Controlled Heroes is not a member of Game Mode World. That's true that it's not. And so that also probably has to be nerfed for the moment. Okay. So that's all good. Heroes exist and quit requested. So those can be ifthered out. And so now we're at least a little bit cleaner, but we're not quite done yet. But we'll have to hold off for tomorrow because I'm just about out of time. Just wanted to make sure that everything's still running okay, which it is. But now we will not get any a launching of the game. And so that's what we'll do tomorrow to sort of finish up that cleanup. And then I think we'll be in pretty good shape. All right, so it'll probably be hard to do Q&A because we haven't quite finished yet. But if you do have a question specifically on something that we just did, we still have about 7 minutes for questions, so I'll try to take a few quick ones. Or not. You could just not have any questions. That works too. Actually, how do the memory arenas work? At the moment, memory arenas are just blocks of memory which get sub-allocated out. So they are kind of just like you take a giant block of memory, you start at the beginning, and every time someone wants something, you just put it wherever the next slot is to fill it in. That's all they do at the moment. Blah 238. Well, since no one's asking, have you heard about AMD open sourcing a lot of their GPU stuff? I have not, although that's probably a very good idea for them because traditionally the biggest problem with AMD has been driver, like inability to get their driver story together. So having more eyes on that problem probably would be good if that's what we're talking about, but I don't really know if that's what you're talking about because I haven't seen the thing you're referring to. X and dash. Should the world mode changing be prefetched like the cutscenes changing? Yes, potentially. And that is one of the reasons that I said that the clearing the mode when you set the mode may not be how I leave it eventually. I may have it so that you create a new mode before you actually switch to it and can have them hanging around for longer. There's also some other reasons to do that, like if you want to crossfade between them or do stuff like that. So that may happen. But you got to do it, you got to get at least to the part where they're partitioned first. Elvin, so by metagame do you mean the pre-game stuff? Yes, just anything that's not the actual playing of the game directly is like metagame. The Happy Pumpkin, hi, I just finished my first semester of computer science in school, just learned some basic Java, but I was wondering if you have any tips moving forward. Also, do you know of any colleges that have good computer science departments? I'm sorry, I don't really know much about school-based computer science. It's not something I have a lot of experience with. My tips going forward is usually that you want to spend as much time doing your own kind of programming as you can. And if you're interested in game programming, then you probably don't really want to be programming in Java because people don't generally program games in Java. You want to learn C, C++, because that tends to be more the standard language. Sorry, slow night. The chat erupted into a flame war over the execution of option menus in games. Okay. Or exclusion of option menus in games. Very well. That is always fine to flame war. Culver Fly. I wonder if there's a specific reason you put the 3 game mode structs into a union. Just because I know I only have one at a time. That's it. Elvin, so I have this generic USB controller that's not being detected by X input. Any ideas how to go about detecting it? Use direct input or try to use an Xbox controller emulator or something? Well, you know, if you just want to get access to it, yeah, you could try direct input. If direct input doesn't work, you could also try raw input and try to access it as an HID device. But that requires you to do a bunch of extra parsing, so, you know, that's certainly a harder route to go. All right, looks like no more Q colons. All right, let's close it down. All right, thank you everyone for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you. As always, if you would like to follow along at home, you can always pre-order the game on handmadehero.org, and it comes with the source code as we develop it, so you can follow along with the series if you're trying to learn programming. That's always an easy thing to do. We also have a forum site where you can ask questions and check out an annotated episode guide maintained by the community. We have a Patreon page you can pledge to if you want to support the video series, and we have a tweet bot that will tweet the schedule you're trying to catch the series live. And speaking of catching it live, I will be back here tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you would like to see me finish the cleanup we did today and get our mode switching working a little bit more like what I would prefer. So we'll be doing that tomorrow. Hope to see you here. Until then, I hope you guys have fun programming, and I will see you on the internet. Take it easy, everyone.